Hi, and welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Kathryn Pedersen here with my co-host, Michael Regan. Today we have another great guest. I'm overjoyed to bring you Kelly Marsh today. She works for Cornerstone as a SVP and Regional Manager. I've known her for a long time, along with Michael as well. We kind of figured out in our pre-conversation that maybe we all met around the same time. So she's been really, not only is she just fun and she's fun to be around, but she's got this different perspective that we're excited to share with you today. So with that, I'll bring in Michael.
Kathryn, thanks so much. Great to have our friend Kelly with us today. Kelly, I'm thinking that when we all three were last together in a room, we were at the Housing Wire gathering down in Austin, Texas. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, in the cool Austin weather of that event, right?
Well, I suppose someone will agree with you on that. There is someone who will agree with you on that. Yeah, Texas is always a dicey weather situation, but I believe you're on the cool coastline of California where the weather is almost always amazing.
Yes, yes. Sunny Southern California for sure.
I love it. I love it. Kelly, Kathryn teed up a couple of things that are certainly true of your background. I'm aware of some of that. We've spent some time together at some events with Cornerstone, and I've seen you in action. You're clearly dynamic in both of these roles. You know, the personal production role. Everybody that is aware of that knows exactly what you're capable of doing. But I've seen you as well within the organizational leadership with the influence that you have and some of the things you've been able to do. It's been fun to watch. I'd love to tip us off with maybe turning back a little bit and learning more about the story behind the story. Where did this drive come from? You know, you've been around the industry now for going on 3 decades. That's a long time. What did life look like before you were in mortgage lending? As a younger person, was this something that you sought after, or how did you find the career path that you're currently in?
It's kind of a funny story. So I'm the youngest and the only girl. So I think being the youngest and only girl with these two older brothers that beat up on me all the time, it made me tough. And it kind of made me fearless. We were a very competitive sports family. We would have ping pong tournaments, and my brother ended up going professional golf, and it's so with that, we are just very competitive. So I think I take a lot of that in my childhood into my professional life. And we also we were raised very consistently. Like we had a very consistent and safe upbringing, which as you get older, you realize that is actually more unique than the opposite. So realizing, yes, there was this consistent, safe home with a lot of competition. I think that's where a lot of my competitiveness and consistency kind of came from. How I got in the industry was I did leave college prematurely, something that I'm not proud of, but I needed to come back to Santa Barbara and kind of regroup. And I reunited with a high school boyfriend whose family was in the mortgage industry. So I was trying to figure out what to do in my life. And they said, you love people and you love numbers. So you should think about being a loan officer, a loan originator. And so I ended up getting my license, which was our real estate license back then. And that's how I got started. And I had no training. I was thrown into the fire and had to figure it out, which I believe made me a very good foundational loan officer because I had to understand how to structure a file, how to process a file, how to ship a file on the back end. Like I had to do everything. So I think that's kind of where my foundation got built. It was
Kelly,
a
you don't know this,
long
but
time ago.
that's all right. You don't know this, but we often have to, come up with a great title for these podcasts, and they often are shaped by something we learn. So I'm putting the leader in the clubhouse. as Forged by Fire. That might be the title. So just so far, so good. We'll see. We'll see if we beat it along the way. Kathryn, I've seen this competitive spirit that she just described. I've been on the pickleball court with Kelly. That gal is not going to let you win. She is going to fight. If you beat her, it's going to be because you had to play hard. And I've seen the spirit alive and well. Kathryn, I think you can relate to some of what you just heard from Kelly. I sense already there's some parallel lines.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is great to hear is just that I have to figure it out spirit. I think Kelly's really good at just being like, okay, let's figure this out. And I think that that's something that's so key in our industry, but also the communication piece. I think Kelly really has, I don't know, has a unique ability to communicate differently and with so much positivity. So I know you talked a little bit about that recently in Vegas, but also that piece of it, because it's different than having that drive and to have the communication piece in one person. So with that communication piece, where do you think you've like tell me where you were then and how you've developed that communication so much? I've just seen it get stronger and stronger over the years as I've seen videos and seen you at events and things like that. So kind of tell me how you've refined that over the years.
I mean, it's funny. We did not go through these questions and kind of explaining how I got in the mortgage industry. I always felt like I was missing something because I didn't have that certificate, that college degree. So I had to overcompensate. And I did come home from college. I was dealing with some emotional challenges and some kind of insecurities and a rough patch in my life when I was 18 years old. Now I'm 50. That was like a whole nother life and a whole nother person. However, I feel like that is what really led me to coaching and my passion for emotional intelligence and growing myself, diving into my soul to figure out, why do I have X, Y, and Z challenge, or why do I think this about myself? And so it was always my own personal journey of how can I be a better human being. And then really over the last 30 some years, emotional intelligence has really come to the forefront. And there's more and more evidence that emotional intelligence, EQ, is almost better than, IQ. And so I didn't have that college certificate or MBA. So I felt like I had to overcompensate to really pour into myself. And I've always been a student of coaching. And I believe in it so much. I really feel like it saved my life to where I just have this overwhelming passion to help people. And at the base of it is communication. If you think about everything in life is revolving around communication with people, communication with ourselves. So that's kind of the heavier probably why behind it is, reflecting back into my really early years and just seeing how many people kind of suck communication.
Well, there's no question that that's a fair statement, but I still want to understand more about how you came to this conclusion because clearly you're advocating for emotional intelligence. Clearly you're advocating for better communication, but that's a choice you made somewhere in your mindset, somewhere back along the way. You made a decision that others don't make. There are some that are aware of the exact same facts that you were and say, well, I can give a rip, deal with it my way or get out of my way. They just don't have that same spirit of ownership of I can improve and I will improve. You chose that path. What inspired you in that way? Was it someone in your life or a situation? You talked about that feeling of I didn't have the certificate, but I have to feel like someone influenced you. Tell us more about that story.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my business coach consultant, Sarah Caputo. I've had her as a constant in my life for the last 18 years. In my professional and my personal life, I was with her last night. We do a in-person coaching at least once a month. We end up going down lots of different tangents, and we have, such a great relationship. So over the years, I've learned these concepts. She's introduced me to like my first communication habit that I talked about at the Mastermind Summit was clear communication is kind communication, and unclear is unkind. So that's introduced by Brene Brown in her book Dare to Lead. And I love that concept, because how often do we receive an email or a text or a phone call and it's like unclear, it's vague, it's incomplete, and it's kind of like it's unkind. So I don't want to be unkind. So I'm constantly asking myself, is that clear? Because if it's not, then I'm being unkind. So that's kind of the like, she introduced me to this concept. I really dug into it with Brene Brown's book. I love that book. And so it's something that's at the forefront of how I lead with my team, with my clients, with the region I support, is really always having, is that clear? Because if it's not, then it's unkind.
And that I've met Sarah and done some like that. You brought her into a group that I was visited. And the one thing that stuck out with me that I've thought about since, and I feel like you operate, so she talks a little bit about like how you are in the basement and how you are in the attic, and how you, like when you're not doing well, you might communicate really differently and you might be a whole different person, right? So you seem to be able to maintain yourself at this level that every time I've seen you, you're positive. Every time I've seen you, you're like all in to whatever you're doing. It's rare that you're just like, like that's just not how I would see Kelly ever being. So I'm sure it's taking a lot of work for you to maintain at that level. So what are some things that you do to kind of check yourself as you start to go into the basement? Let's use Sarah's words. She'll be so proud of us. Um, and you can pull yourself out a little bit and say, hey, what do I need to do to check? Not only am I checking my communication to make sure it's clear so that it's kind. I love that concept, by the way. But also, what am I doing when I start to kind of veer into that category where maybe people can pick up that I'm not communicating well, and I've started to go into that basement of Kelly?
I think it's constantly working on my self-awareness, and realizing that we are such influential human beings that how I show up is going to impact the people around me, whether it's positively and negatively. So just having a super spidey sense self-awareness, which is sometimes hard to do. I think another really big thing is to really, but part of the self-awareness is like recognizing, okay, is that a story or is that fact? Is that the story I'm telling myself? And just kind of, again, trying to recognize that the basement exists, right? That's when we kind of go into that blind spot, or kind of some of the, our I would say, our weaknesses, but we'll say blind spots, and get down into the basement and recognize it, call it out, and be like, yeah, I'm kind of in a crappy mood. I'm kind of like spinning around and my stories are super negative right now. Sometimes calling it out, naming it, if you can name it, you can tame it, right? Is that Steve Scanlon's comment? But if you can name it, you can tame it. Just having awareness and knowing that I'm human and so are other people. So we have our moments.
Kelly, when you're running into folks and you find them in those, as Steve would call it, an amygdala hijack, and their cortisol is pumping, and we've got stress. Like there is a moment where they maybe aren't so self-aware as you just described, and they maybe don't have those healthy checkpoints to catch them before things spiral. How do you coach someone to develop self-awareness that doesn't naturally have it? It's almost like asking, how do you encourage someone to care more when they maybe don't naturally care as much about that as they could, or maybe you would even suggest they should? How do you engage that person?
I think so often and I'm super guilty of this. I show up always thinking I've got the solution. I want to jump to the solution versus just turning off my mouth and turning on my ears and listening. Because so often, if we just ask a few questions and then we shut up and listen, that person has the answers within themselves, and it's so much more effective and powerful for them to come to their own solution than me saying, well, here's what you should do. Like, I really try not to should on people, right? Like, that's just not effective. So asking questions and really listening more, talking.
Yeah,
Because
well
they
said.
know.
I resonate with everything you just said, and I set it up that way on purpose because I think these are the things, these are the real life dilemmas. Like we can lay out an ideal framework for positive mindset and positive intelligence, both of which I think on paper you're exactly right. We there's plenty of evidence now. We can demonstrate that those things win. I mean, Dr. Carol Dweck proved that in her mindset book 20 years ago with her Stanford study. I think the evidence is in. Yet we still find people every single day that decide to ignore those facts and operate within this fixed mindset where they just decide, well, either I'm going to win or you're going to win, but one of us is going to lose. And that first step is always a pothole that's difficult to get out of. And so it sounds like what you're really doing is taking more of an empathetic approach to, okay, let me listen, let me hear. You're taking the approach of maybe diffusing some of that tension a little bit so that maybe you can help navigate that with the person who maybe doesn't come into it with your level of self-awareness, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and I think recognizing like I am an external communicator, so I really need to externally talk, like vent, maybe barf all over Sarah, or really get it out, which not everybody is that way. Like my husband is very much internal, and there's a lot of people that have to internalize it. And for me, I like don't want it to fester inside my soul. I need to get it out. And so I process that way, but recognizing that people don't all process that way and giving them some grace and space.
I think that knowing it, as a leader, you really have to look at all the different personalities and figure out how to kind of hammer at each one of them. But there was something in the notes that I was like, ooh, I need to hear about this during our podcast, which was communication habits that you see are like costing opportunities, hurting people's business, hurting people's emotional development. What are some of those things that you're seeing as a leader that you're like, ooh, this is some great things? Because I think that knowing what those are can help create that self-awareness for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, really having, making an effort on clear communication and asking yourself, is that clear? We're moving at such a fast pace and we have things coming at us all the time, but we're also working within a high stakes environment. We're dealing with people's biggest asset, their debt, timelines, we're dealing with like real big emotions here. So when the stakes are high, communication is even more important because people are stressed. It's an exciting and scary time. You've got all these people involved in a transaction. And if we're not having a clear communication process, things really go sideways fast. And as I have supported now a lot of loan originators, I see the impact of that in the fires that we have to help fix. And a lot of it just comes down to communication. And had we communicated early enough, clear enough, really thinking about it, we could have avoided a lot of the challenges. Now we're still going to have challenges with, a guideline missed or something like that. But so much of it comes down to communication. And we oftentimes in this business kind of hide. We go into like the flight stage and it just makes it even worse. So we have to show up as the leader of our business and we have to communicate early enough before it just stories get created and it just starts blowing up. And so much of it could have been prevented. So I see that a lot. So
Yeah,
that's the concept of clear communication.
so good, Kelly. The way you unpack that made me think of the classic phrase that maybe is true in a lot of those high stake, high stress situations. It won't always be what you say, it'll be how you say it. And if we can help people understand how important it is to see themselves and hear themselves and understand how it feels to be on the other side of the way in which they communicate, you can really help level up. I think Kathryn's right. That's why that's fun to see how that shows up in the data points that these are folks that get, higher reviews, higher referral, higher retention, all these things. Those are nice. That's a good 3R strategy right there. I might have to own that one and come back to it. But Kelly, I think that's great for our audience to hear that, because most of us want to believe we're really smart. We're in 2026. I'm not sure anyone is still a professional in the real estate and housing industry or the lending industry if they don't believe that they are a pro. It's not a question of skill and education and experience. It's really about that nuance, and communication is that beautiful place in which that nuance shows up, and it starts to separate those of us who might have embraced that growth mindset and those that haven't. I want to learn more about what happened. You presented in Las Vegas. Kathryn hinted at that a few minutes ago, but you had an audience. I don't know how many hundreds of people got to hear this, but I want our audience to hear a little bit about some of the takeaways from that, because as you lay this out, I'm sure you've got an audience of folks that are furiously taking notes. What are some of the other nuggets that you'd love to share, and we'll pass them along to our audience as well?
Yeah, the second communication habit that I spoke about was, and you want to write this down if you're listening, an unspoken expectation is a resentment waiting to happen. So often we assume people know what they should be doing. And that assumption, it creates a lot of friction. It creates a lot of these, and a lot of times, like, we'll ask ourselves, okay, did I clearly define what they were supposed to be doing? And I just had a meeting with my team about, get so granular. On Mondays, this is what we should be doing. And instead, I'm like, well, they should be just doing it. They should be calling leads. They should be calling PQs. They should be following up on this, and this. And it's like, did I clearly define it? Or did I just assume they knew? Because if I just assumed they knew what they were supposed to be doing, then I can't be surprised when it doesn't happen. So I think that's something I also deal with a lot with teams, is that, when teams are working together, there is a lot of unspoken expectations, which then creates the resentments and the friction of a team, and the dynamics of a team really start to build and get dysfunctional. Very, very common. And then it happens in life. I talked about an unspoken expectation with my family.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly that's exactly where my brain was going, Kelly, is as much as the application of the audience might have been transactionally in the housing industry, the fact is you're stating a truth of life. And by the way, we call our podcast Building Bigger Lives. We're looking at the whole person, and you're really passing along some wisdom that I hope we're applying to several areas of our lives. Because you're right, unspoken expectations as a parent with a child, unspoken expectations with a spouse, I'd sit here as we're recording today. We've spent time with some families on vacation. One of the things that we do every time we head out of town with our friends is we try to get those expectations laid out up front, so that nobody gets there and thinks, oh, well, this isn't the way I thought we were going to spend our hard-earned vacation time. We want to get those, because it's exactly what you said. So it applies to so many areas of life. Kathryn, pick up on that one, because I know you understand that as well as anyone.
So I immediately thought of the delegation and all the levels of delegation, and was like, oh, this is such a good full circle moment as far as that goes. Is I think the question listeners can ask themselves is, hey, what am I expecting from someone that I haven't communicated correctly? And where's that divide? How can I communicate this more clearly and into the style that the person will hear it? So I cannot tell one of my children something the same way as I do the other one, because and like, you think all your kids are the same and they just are not. But same thing with our teams, is someone will take something in differently, and what is clear communication to them? And Kelly, I'm not sure how have you been able to make sure that you're communicating in a way that a whole big team still gets it, even though they have different communication styles?
I would say we have to document. If we're going to have a process, we got to document it, and then ask if it makes sense and peel it back and keep reevaluating it. I would say everybody does communicate slightly, like they receive feedback differently. I mean, that has to do with different personalities. So in some ways, I'm trying to think of how to answer that, because that's a really, really good question. And I'm trying to think of the different styles. I think it's knowing how somebody responds to communication. Like, I know so-and-so is really good with text messages. I know so-and-so really hates long emails. Like, you will trigger them, right? Bullet it. Like, I don't need a novel. Like, that's kind of how I am, is I don't need a novel. I like bullet. I'm a bullet girl. I definitely like bullet points. So I guess it's understanding kind of their love language to really know, like, what is going to be the most effective way to communicate with them. Because some people are phone only, right? So that's step one. What's the most effective way that they will receive that communication?
Kelly, you
So,
definitely handled that really well, because as a coach watching you process a really great question, Kathryn, I think you nailed it. And I hope our audience hears that. That wasn't just Kelly riffing and winging it. I think she nailed it, because that is exactly it. If you are a leader listening today or watching today, I hope what you grabbed from that is you actually have to care enough to know your people, to know who they are, to know what makes them tick and what ticks them off, and to try to design a communication process or delivery system for that person. Now, if you're a leader thinking, man, that just sounds like a lot of work, like I just want to do it the way I do it, say it the way, great, do that. And good luck maintaining a scalable following. Because, by the way, there will be some folks that love that and follow you. Because if we look at any behavioral style analysis, there's always going to be a percentage of people that they're like, oh, I love it when Michael speaks, directly and gets to the point. The problem is I've got, 2/3 of my audience, that's not what they prefer. And so if all I care about is leading 1/3 of my audience and not caring about the other 2/3, I guess keep going then. But most folks I've met in leadership roles understand that the definition of a leader is someone who actually has a following. And if you want to grow your following, you're going to take the wisdom of Kathryn's question, apply it in the way that Kelly just did, and you're going to really think about, do I know my people well enough to know how to do what Kelly just said, to know when to get to the point and to know when to slow it down, to know when to use those bullets and when to write the novel. Really great answer, Kelly. I love that.
thanks. I have something really interesting about the unspoken expectation. So I had the aha moment with my family, and it was something regarding like what's for dinner and how that really triggers me because I'm working my butt off all week. They have more time than I have. So that was really funny. But also, as I was planning for this presentation over the last, 3-4 months, really, really planning day and night. I mean, I spent hours upon hours really diving into these concepts. Something hit me as well about the use of ASAP. So we assume somebody understands what ASAP means, but ASAP is one of the vaguest, unclear things that we can say, because ASAP for who? Like, for who? Because my ASAP could be very different than your ASAP. And so just kind of really picking apart the use of ASAP and how often I saw that in the last 90 days in communication. And it's like, but I don't know what you mean by that. Do you mean by the end of the day, or do you mean by the end of the week? Right? So that was one thing that was really powerful in this journey of my keynote, is so we don't use ASAP anymore in our communication.
So one thing I love about that is there's probably 15 of those, right? Not just ASAP, but that started, getting me thinking of, hey, touch base when you have a minute. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean send me a quick text and say, oh, I'm open? Or does that say give me a call? Does that say send me a Teams message? What does that actually mean? So I think we have a lot of those in our life that we do, and we assume that people will do that. I had a person I work with here who called me. It was like Saturday on FaceTime, and I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do. And I was like, but that's just how she communicates, right? So I would only do that in well, I probably wouldn't because it's just not generationally normal, but for her, it's very normal. So it can be very different on what we interpret the same exact word to mean. So think through that. I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant, Kelly, of like, what do you mean by ASAP? What do you mean by touch base? Or what does
Yeah.
that mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, I
great
really
question.
don't have a minute. Or what about like no rush when you get
Oh,
time? And it's like, even a client will do that. So then you're like, well, it's no rush. It's no rush. It's no rush. And the next thing I know, wow, it's been 2 weeks. Like, that's not good. No rush. It went to low priority, but then it becomes now an urgent. And I, feel like I dropped the ball and I probably did, right? Because I, in my mind, just put it in the no rush category.
hmm. That is so true. That's so true. When you get a minute, how many minutes?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many
I don't
things.
have a minute.
Kathryn, I sense you've already unpacked a great new episode for us. It'll be inspired by Kelly Marsh, and we'll just carry this conversation forward. Kelly, when you were in Las Vegas, you've highlighted a couple of these key points that you presented. Was there a third or a tie down that you'd hope our audience today would get to experience?
Yeah. So the third is my favorite, and it's something that I learned from Sarah years ago. Um, Hang on, what happened here? My computer just went blank, so I'm back. Sorry. It's like it went white. I was like, anyway. So it's my favorite. It is if you promote it, you permit it. And it's a powerful statement because I'm not somebody that naturally loves confrontation. I told you a little bit about my childhood at the beginning, where I grew up in a very loving, consistent, safe childhood. Although, my brothers, we beat up on each other, but I wasn't shaped by conflict resolution. I didn't have, parents fighting or there be dysfunction, like unfortunately so many people grow up around. So I wasn't shaped by, really feeling comfortable around confrontation. But that concept of if I permit it, then I promote it, I'm the guilty party. So that has become such a core conviction for me because it forces me to address what needs to be addressed. Because it's hard to have a hard conversation. It's hard to address behavior, especially when we care about the person, we work with them or they're a family, it's hard. So that I'll say, if I permit it, I promote it. So and I feel like if we held ourselves to that standard, we would have a lot better cultures within our organization. We would have a lot better connections with people. We would have a standard. And so that is my third is my favorite because it really has forced me to address what needs to be addressed, even when I
That's
don't
really
want it.
good. That's really good. And Kelly, I when I hear that, maybe my ears hear it through a relatively neutral lens that says there's some connotation for that to avoid the negative, but there's also some opportunity with that in which the things we permit can also lead to a lot of positive reinforcement that we promote. So I think there are some it allows the listener to take that and run with it. Yes, it's a warning against maybe some things that have some
Mhm.
unintended consequences, but it's also an opportunity for some unintended benefits. You can really change the way you think and act and deliver in these communication styles in a way that can have a massively positive impact on you if you're willing to see it and do something about it. So I really love that that was your big takeaway on this because maybe people feel stuck. Maybe they feel like this is just who I am, or even to your point of influence. This is just how I was raised. I don't know any different. That's
Yeah.
a lie. That's a lie you've told. Well, may not be a lie that you were raised that way. It's a lie that you're stuck in that way. That you can, in fact, learn a new way to communicate, and it can lead to really wonderful and positive outcomes. I love that you shared
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Thanks. It was real. And it's something that I have taken with me all these years that I think has really shaped me as a leader. It shaped me as a wife. It's really, and it's hard. I mean, I find myself having to like give myself a little kick in the butt sometimes to address something, a behavior or something within myself too, by the way. This also, like you said, Michael, this applies to, there's plenty of times I've had to stop and look myself in the mirror and say, what am I allowing right now that I say that I don't want? Because if I permit it, I promote it.
And I think there's a lot of leaders who don't always think through what avoiding an issue, avoiding something that's coming up, what that does in a month or a year, as you have that slide of people where, well, they didn't get called out on it. So it goes a little further and a little further and a little further. And all of a sudden, everyone on the team is showing up at 10 a.m. and not getting their calls done or whatever that looks like for their group. So I think it's really a great sentence just to say that of, hey, is that what I want to promote with my team? And then back off from that because it can be something little and it's so much easier to talk about it when it's small than when the whole team is all of a sudden showing up at 10. Now you have to totally change the culture and upset the apple cart completely versus just a little bit of a pullback. So it's such a great way to reduce a leader's stress later, to keep the team in check, all the things. So I think it's a brilliant sentence to continue to ask.
Yeah, Kathryn, you just highlighted something that reminds me of a quote you've probably heard me say, which is an old Dr. Henry Cloud quote from Boundaries for Leaders. As a leader, you're always going to get some combination of what you create and what you allow. So just be thoughtful around what you create and what you allow, because the consequences, maybe unintended, are still real. And now you're going to have to deal with them. And that compounding, choosing to ignore that and allowing that to compound is your responsibility as a leader. So the beauty today, if you're listening to the wisdom of Kelly Marsh, is own that, look in that mirror and give yourself an opportunity to say, I can do something about this. I can change the way in which I think about these things and therefore what I choose to do with them. It's a really great reminder. Kelly, in closing, any closing thoughts? I'm sure you walked off that stage and a lot of people were congratulating you on the presentation side, but how about the impact side? Were there some folks that decided to share with you any of their stories or anything you could maybe encourage our audience with who might have heard something today for the first time?
Yeah, I got several emails, and one really sticks out to me. He emailed me and said, I just want to know, I want you to know how impactful your talk was. By far, I walked away. You had the lasting impact, and I have significance in my top 5 strengths, which is the strengths balcony basement thing Kathryn was talking about. But bigger than that was he was having a lot of challenges with his wife, and just really taking these communication habits and really looking at this big picture of, these resentments that have been building over time that were unspoken, and, the permit promote concept. And so again, it's such a passion for me. And I think it's the foundation of so much in life is communication. So, I mean, I really want to continue to evolve my life. And believe me, I'm human. And I mess these up all the time. My family now has a joke. Oh yeah, that's real clear, Mom. You're real clear. Clear as kind, Mom. So believe me, I'm human. It's a never-ending journey of us evolving and continuing to grow as human beings and as leaders. So.
Well, Kathryn, I think that's a great place for us to press pause on this conversation because, Kelly, you hit an apex there. That's a beautiful takeaway. I hope our audience has enjoyed hearing just a glimpse of your leadership style, and I hope it causes them to be curious and go follow you, go learn more about you, go see how you're impacting folks. And that's really going to be my takeaway is, a lot of folks seek stages like that because they love the bravado that comes and it feeds their ego. In your case, what I really love is you got to impact very real people. And I know you just gave us one example, but even if just that one, what a huge difference you could have made in that person's life simply by being clear in your communication from a stage. And that's all it takes. If we can help that one person, who knows what the multiplication effect is of that. And I applaud you. It's really great that you were able to share that. Thanks for being our guest today, Kelly.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so fun, and it's so good to see you both.
Great. Well,
Thank
with
you.
that, We're going to wrap up this episode of Building Bigger Lives with our guest, Kelly Marsh. Today, we unpacked several things that I hope you'll go back and reflect upon. And if you enjoyed them, please consider sharing them with someone in your world. And as we talked about, they may not understand much about real estate or mortgage lending. They may have just heard some of these points and they could apply them at home in their personal life. That's part of our mission with Building Bigger Lives, is not to silo these parts of our professional careers, but to see how they impact us in all areas of our lives. And we hope that's true for you today. And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you on an episode soon.